Ever since I was a little kid and I saw Tobey Maguire's trilogy of Spider-Man, I have been absolutely in love with the character. He's been gifted with some of the best movies and games in the entire superhero space. He's just a very likable character, and he absolutely has the most unique and cool powers of any superhero. Every single time one of those prompts came up in school of if you could have any superpower, what would you pick? My number one pick would always be Spider-Man. Yeah, I know it's technically cheating because he has multiple powers, but shut up, okay? Wall crawling, spidey sense, super strength, and probably the best of them all, web swinging. He has to have some of the most exciting and memorable powers of all time. It's got to be higher than like what, Aquaman? Who's picking Aquaman? With Across the Spider-Verse coming out recently and Spider-Man 2 coming out later this year, I really wish there was a game that made me feel like Spider-Man. Yeah, I know it's been said a million billion times, but come on, we all kind of want to, right? He's got a very unique set of powers that is hard to kind of put into a video game. Sure, he has super strength, but like, come on, every superhero has superhero strength. It's really hard to nail things like web swinging, wall crawling, and make it feel like you're actually Spider-Man and not some asshole. I thought it'd be fun to go through the history of Spider-Man games and see which games actually make you feel like Spider-Man. I am not going to be getting into the story of any of these Spider-Man games. I don't think it adds to the experience of being Spider-Man, so if I give these games a score based on the experience, just know, nothing to do with the story at all. I'm also going to be talking about the definitive version of these games. Spider-Man 1 for the PS2 also came out on like 6 other platforms, but the real experience is on the PS2, so that's the one I'm going to be talking about. During my very in-depth research of Spider-Man, we can see he made his first debut into the gaming realm with Spider-Man on the Atari 2600.
This game sucks my spider balls!
Now, as a first outing, it could have been worse, but let's be honest, this doesn't feel like Spider-Man. The web slinging alone, which is your only movement option pretty much, really bothers me. How is he doing this? He's climbing up a building, he's moving at diagonal swinging. Why would he not just climb? After this game though, Spider-Man entered a beat 'em up period. For like the next pretty much 10, 20 years, Spider-Man was a beat 'em up character. He wasn't doing a lot of swinging, he was just going around beating people up with his fists. Nothing special. Kind of disappointing. To get our first real Spider-Man experience, we were going to have to wait until the PS1 with Spider-Man. And real talk, why are there so many video games called Spider-Man? Call it something else, please. There's like 5 of them. With the introduction of the third dimension, we got our first chance at web swinging, and it's pretty trash. It's very held back by the PS1, and it's obvious. You can't go below buildings pretty much, so you're just flying, but it's web swinging. You go from point A to point B, and that's pretty much it. Not very in-depth, it's pretty slow, not very fun. He can web crawl, and it's pretty slow, but I mean, it gets the job done, it's fine. Like I said, it's really hard to mess this up. Your combat system isn't super deep, it's pretty kicky punchy, but I like what you can do with the webs in this game. Spider-Man has a spider gun. When he shoots enemies with like spider webs, it doesn't web them up or anything. They just get shot and they die, I guess. It's really funny. I love it so much. It's so goofy. You can also use this from the ceiling, so you can kind of just snipe people on the ground. I love it. Overall, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10 on the Spider-Man experience. This is the ground base level of Spider-Man. I would be shocked if a game somehow got this worse. It's not a terrible experience, and the story itself is actually really good, but it leaves a lot to be desired. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro is pretty much the same game. Same web mechanics, same swinging, same wall crawling. It did add a little bit to the combat though, so I'm going to give it 0.5 higher at a 5.5 out of 10. The next big Spider-Man game was Spider-Man. Again, this Spider-Man is based off of the Sam Raimi movie, and it certainly shows. Although we've made a jump in the hardware, it has the same web swinging mechanics as Spider-Man on the PS1, which was very disappointing. He feels faster, but he also feels just as unintuitive and clunky as the first 3D game. Outside the web swinging, they did make some improvements to, ironically, the web crawling. It's still slow, but you can now web zip to speed up the process dramatically. He also gets some pretty cool movement buffs from the web zip. If he's pointing at a wall, he can immediately zip to it. If he uses it while standing, he can climb onto the ceiling, and he can drag down from it like that iconic Spider-Man pose he does. The combat system, however, is where they obviously made the most improvements. Through Golden Spiders, there's about 21 different combos in the game that you can unlock, which isn't a ton, but compared to the last game, this is a drastic improvement, and a very welcomed one at that. Spider-Man also happens to be the best Green Goblin game of all time. Real talk, this is one of the most insane cheats I have ever seen in a game from this era. You pretty much get to play through the entire game as Green Goblin. And let me tell you, he controls so much better than Spider-Man. Using the glider in like 3D spaces is so much more intuitive and fun than the normal Spider-Man swinging. It's insane. As a Spider-Man experience, I would give this game probably like a 6.5 out of 10. It made a couple improvements, but there's still a long ways to go. As a Green Goblin game, this is a 10 out of 10. This is fantastic. After almost 2 decades of games, it felt like we were on the cusp of an open world Spider-Man game. And in 2004, we got SpiderMan II. This game, no exaggeration, changed the trajectory of Spider-Man games pretty much forever, it seems like. It is so satisfying to move in this game. There have been times where I just turn it on, I don't even play through the story mode, I just swing around for hours while I listen to like a podcast or something. It's unrivaled. Finally, these weird particles have parted from New York, and you can actually swing around and experience all of it. And they did an amazing job on the first open world. It's insane how well they got this right. They have a boost mechanic when you're swinging, and it gives you so much momentum and oomph, and it never gets old, ever. And Spider-Man is finally swinging from buildings instead of just swinging from like helicopters or the sky or whatever that he's doing here. The game can definitely be a little bit jarring when you're first learning to play. When I went from Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2, I was knocking into buildings. It felt a little clunky, but once it clicked, I was moving at speeds. It was so much fun. I can't get over it. This game also introduces the web zip, which is a very welcome change and is found in pretty much every Spider-Man game after this. Sometimes you're gonna run into a low building that you can't really hook onto with a normal swing, so a web zip just lets you scoot right by it. You keep your momentum, you keep everything. It's also really nice when you're turning corners and you don't think you're going to be able to make it without slamming into a building. You web zip to change your trajectory, and it's so good, man. Throughout the game, you're able to upgrade your swing speed up to level 8, and I would compare this to the system in Sonic Frontiers. The first 2 levels, you're not going to really feel it, but then eventually you get to the later half of the levels, and it's like, whoa, when did I start moving this fast? The combat in this game is pretty similar to the first one. There's a little bit more to upgrade, but I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. You finally get the ability to run while you wall crawl. And the system's peaked here. Pretty much every game after this has running, and for good reason. It's all you really need for a good wall crawling system. Spider-Man 2 is an easy 9.5 out of 10 for me. The only thing they could have probably improved on was the combat, but given that it's 2004, it's on the GameCube, and they made so many changes to the swing mechanics, I'll look past it. Alright, up next we got Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's pretty good. Honestly, the best part about this game is the art style. This really makes it feel like it's just ripped right out of the Ultimate comic books, and I love it. No other game has attempted this art style, and it's a shame because they did it so well here and it looks so good. The web swinging feels pretty similar, although I feel like there are more lower buildings, maybe at least in Peter's neighborhood, and it's really annoying. Like, you can't do full-on swings unless you go to the city. Like, trying to navigate around Peter's hometown, it sucks. I'm also not a huge fan of having to web up enemies or else the battles draw on really long. It kind of boils down to, alright, I can web them up now the battle's over. Not a ton of variety. It's just okay. The coolest part about this game, though, is that we actually get to play as Venom. Not the symbiote, like actually Venom. And he feels like a tank. You can eat people to regain health. He has like just whips and he's brutally attacking people. He can't swing. He has kind of a web zip. He moves like a tank. It's so much fun, and it's really cool that we finally get to play as Venom for once. Ultimate Spider-Man is a consistent 8.5 out of 10. They didn't make any revolutionary changes. The introduction of Venom was really nice, but I wish they did more with the combat instead of just beat him up until you can web him. Alright, now I am not a graphics guy. I think the GameCube looks great. I play my Switch every day. I think it looks fine. But Spider-Man 3 looks genuinely disgusting. When I first sat down to play this, I thought there was something wrong with my PS3. So I looked up footage. I'm like, what is this game supposed to look like? I feel like I'm playing a tech demo. And it really is just this ugly. And I don't understand why. I can't say this for any other Spider-Man game, but this takes me out of the experience. It's just so jarring and ugly. Why did they use this font? Did they only have access to the Arial font on their computer? This is insane. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the web swinging is downgraded, and I don't know how they managed to do that. If you go from Spider-Man 2 to Spider-Man 3, it is so much insanely worse. It's shocking. They added this mechanic to where you're web swinging every time, not even if you're momentum boosting. It does this like motion blur on the outside of the screen, and it genuinely makes me lightheaded. Like while I was recording footage for this, my head hurt, and I'm like, why did they do this? This is terrible. He is also insanely tiny. Like when it's daytime and he's in his normal suit, I can see him just fine. I have to focus a little bit. But once it hits nighttime and you're in the symbiote suit, I cannot see him. I have pretty bad eyesight, and it becomes impossible for me. The combat also feels like a downgrade from 2 somehow. I feel like every time I'm punching someone or comboing an enemy, Peter will end up in the air and the enemy will just be on the ground and I have to wait for him to fall back down. They also added the motion blur effect to combat when you're doing the Spidey sense. For whatever reason, it doesn't look good. It's terrible. I hate this. The symbiote suit was also pretty disappointing. I wish it added more to Peter. I wish it felt better to swing in. I wish it felt more powerful to fight in. And I just don't get that sensation from it. This game is like at best a 5 out of 10 for me. I would rather play Spider-Man 1 on the PS2 than play this game again. Genuinely terrible. Web of Shadows is a very divisive Spider-Man game, but man is it fun to move around in. The combat is what absolutely shines here. We got the ability to web strike, and it revolutionized it. Fighting enemies in the air now feels like a joy. Before, you would have to like jump up and punch them or shoot a web at them, and that was okay. But being able to zip right to them and start attacking them, fantastic. You could attack an enemy, put him in the air, web strike to another enemy on the ground, keep the combo going. I got combos up to like over 100, and it felt amazing to do it. We also got another chance at the symbiote suit, and it did it so much better than Spider-Man 3 did. You can throw cars around, you feel powerful. I know I didn't want to talk about the story that much, but being able to switch between the normal suit and the symbiote suit, and it makes your decisions based off of what suit you're in, really cool, and I really like that. This is absolutely the best symbiote gameplay we've ever seen until Spider-Man 2 comes out in the fall, most likely. Web of Shadows arguably has better swinging than Spider-Man 2. I am not very good at it, but this game has a very high skill ceiling, and I've seen what people can do with this system, and it is jaw-dropping. Web of Shadows is a 10 out of 10 experience. Once you have the skills necessary, you have so much freedom of expression in this game unlike any other Spider game, and it's truly one of the best. I'm going to pair Edge of Time and Shadow Dimensions together because it's the same company, same engine, all things like that, and to be honest, they're really, really similar to each other. Both games have an emphasis on combat, and it's a nice throwback to the PS1 game. Pretty much everything after Spider-Man 2 on the PS2 is open world, so it's a really nice change of pace. Shattered Dimensions especially did a phenomenal job here. Juggling the 4 different types of Spider-Man and their gameplay aspects and all that, it kept combat pretty fresh throughout the entire game, even though it's pretty short. I will never complain being able to play as Spider-Man 2099. He's my favorite Spider-Man, and they did him a really good job here. I'm not gonna lie though, I'm a little bummed it's not open world. I would love to swing around as 2099 in an open world environment. One day though, one day. These games are an easy 8 out of 10 for me. It's a different experience from the open world, but it is a welcomed experience. Ignoring the story alone, it's a very good time. Amazing Spider-Man pretty much does nothing right. It doesn't look very good, and the web swinging is the worst swinging in the entire series. This is another game that I actually got lightheaded playing it. Just like Spider-Man 3, they just went for too much here. They went for like a movie feel, which sure I can appreciate, but it's not a movie, it's a video game. They were too ambitious with this. The combat is also pretty much, you figure it out in the first 2 hours, and then it's pretty much downhill from there. Overall, it's about a 6 out of 10 experience. It tried to do some really cool things, and it fell super flat. The glow up from Amazing Spider-Man 1 to Amazing Spider-Man 2 is astounding. It is so much fun to swing in this game. They took everything that was bad about the first game and they did it well here. Swinging has never been this much fun before. The dual hand system allows for so much creativity, so much precision that we still haven't seen again today. And this really feels like the fastest Spider-Man has ever been swinging. At some points when I was swinging, I thought I was going to go so fast, I was going to crash my PS3, I was going so fast. You can just rip so hard over and over again. You could see like the city like struggling to render the rest of it. It is so much fun. It's actually addicting. Again, the combat this time around doesn't really do anything for me. It felt like most of the energy went towards upgrading the swing system, which honestly I'm 100% okay with. This is an easy 8.5 out of 10 for me. It is so much fun to swing in this game. This might take over my favorite game to just mess around in. The combat falls super short, but man, that swinging is good. Finally, we have Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales. These have the smoothest swinging I have ever felt in a Spider-Man game. It's not the fastest, but it's just in that sweet spot where it feels satisfying even 40 hours into the game. The best thing they added to this game was being able to jump out of a web zip. Using it to get a shit ton of momentum was really fun, and it makes lower buildings a lot easier to deal with. There is so much different stuff in your arsenal this time around. You have drones, you have electric shocks, you have your normal web bullets. It's crazy how much you can do, and you're constantly unlocking stuff, you're constantly upgrading stuff, so it feels fresh pretty much until the end of the story because you're always getting something new to mess around with. They also have cool command abilities for finishers. Best combat in the series by far. Although Miles has a little bit less going on with his web powers, he does have the Venom powers, which adds a little bit more variety to it. He's got the Venom Punch, a Venom Blast, he can be invisible, he's got an impact radius. They're drip fed to you enough throughout the game where it still feels fresh, even with all the stuff Peter had. The Insomniac games get an easy 10 out of 10 for me. They're so polished, it does everything right. I am so excited for Spider-Man 2. There's one game I skipped over because you can't really play it anymore unless you really go out of your way. Spider-Man Far From Home VR is one of the coolest experiences I've done in VR. There's not a ton going on to it, there's no combat or anything like that, and the footage does not do it justice, but swinging in VR feels genuinely surreal. I know I've said Spider-Man an irritating amount of times during this video, but man do I love these games. Even at its very lowest, they never fail to grab my attention, and they're always a fun time. I really love these games, and I hope you do too. Excuse me, I have a city to save. God, I am literally him.